chapter 14. We're going to jump in right at verse 22 and make our comments as we go. It says, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. What's all going on? Well, we've been looking, these chapters about Jesus moving around the countryside, doing miracles, doing all these wonderful things, and culminating in this feeding of the 5,000. And there's a feeling that's kind of building that maybe he is the one that will be king. He could be that one to take over the Romans. And it's a growing idea. And this is kind of the zenith, if you will, of his popularity, near the end of the second year of his ministry. And so, at this point, the crowds are excited. The disciples, I'm sure, are sitting back like, you did it. We are doing it. Look at what we have done. We've got Jesus here. He's done all these great things. The crowds love him. We're going to march on Jerusalem. This is going to be wonderful. And there's this building sense that something is coming. And it's rooted in this idea of authority that's found in Jesus. Because all these things kind of come together here in this story. But go back with me a few places. Mark chapter 1, it says, they were all amazed, so they questioned among themselves, saying, what is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. And at once his fame spread throughout all the surrounding region. Matthew chapter 7, we looked at it. When Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching. Why? Well, he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes. He's going to call the 12 together. He gave them power and authority over demons and to cure diseases. And at the end of Matthew, which we were about halfway through, Jesus said to them, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. He's going to give out that authority. But what's the deal with authority? Well, if you're going to be king, you better have some authority. You better have some sway. You better have something behind your words. And they were recognizing in Jesus, he had something all others did not. And so there's this growing popularity, this growing sense that he could be the one. For all the wrong reasons, though. And so that's why we get to this where it says, immediately he made the disciples get in a boat and go to the other side. Immediately he forced them. He compelled them. He insisted. It wasn't like, if you want, to get in the boat, go for a ride. He pushes them. He compels them. Not many people can do that in our lives. That are going to come and compel you to do something. Your parents, perhaps. A guy with a badge, or a gal with a badge. Yeah, they're going to compel you to do some things. But generally, you have to have some kind of relationship for that to happen, for people to compel you to do something. If you don't know someone and they're trying to get you to do something, you'd be like, yeah, whatever. Why? Because there isn't that relationship. There isn't that connection. Jesus compels them. He's very direct. He's very bold to direct them to get in the boat and go to the other side. That's a key phrase. Keep that in mind. He's going to stay behind. He's going to dismiss the crowds. Why? Well, the disciples are all amped up because they've delivered all of the food. They're like, yes, this is great. This is so good. And Jesus is like, not great. Not the right time. You need to go. I'm going to dismiss the crowds. We're going to deflate this whole thing. We're going to do the opposite of how to build a popularity contest or of how to build a campaign. No more rallies. We're done with rallies. We're going to disperse the crowd. Why would he disperse the crowd? Well, we've mentioned it, but the other reason is he needed to recharge. You need to recharge. He just spent the day with all these people, ministering to them, providing for them, and he's tired. He needs to get away and pray by himself. We talked about this last week. It came up at the news of John the Baptist. Jesus took time to get away. It seemed like a regular practice that he had. When there was things going on and he needed that recharge, he didn't get around more people and talk about the situation. He got alone with the Father and got recharged. It's why Ephesians 5:18 so imperative for us, which is be filled with the Spirit. And in the root, the idea is this ongoing, being filled. Why? Because you leak. And so you need to be refilled. And in a sense, Jesus is modeling this for us. He leaks. You're like, what? He's the Son of God. Yeah, but he's man. And he's operating as a man, and so he needs the filling of the Spirit. And what does he do? He regularly takes time out to spend with the Father. He goes to the mountain. Where do you go? Like, I go to? I don't go anywhere. Maybe it's a closet. Maybe it's the backyard. Maybe it's the river. Maybe it's the lake. Maybe it's... You need to develop a place and a time where you regularly get away with the Lord, where you regularly meet with the Lord, you and him. What was Jesus praying about? He doesn't tell us. But here's what we know. Later in John chapter 17, Jesus is praying for the disciples and for us. Why? It says he prays for them and for those that are to come. That's you. That's me. What was he praying? That they'd be rich, famous, that they would be one, and that they would know his glory. In other words, the way Jesus got recharged was not praying for himself to have more strength, not praying that he would have a better day, a super day tomorrow. It was to pray for others. What? Well, because often when I pray for myself. I pray about my needs and the things that God needs to do, and sometimes that's not very recharging. But what if we spend more time in our prayer life praying for others? The other-centered life is a key to recharge. Why? Because it's not about you. And in that, you'll get filled. You'll get recharged. And I think that was true with Jesus. Right now, the Bible tells us Jesus is at the right hand of the Father, making intercession for us. He's praying for you and for me. There's something about being other-centered, even in our prayer life, that we can't miss. If we develop it in our prayer life, that's going to leak out into other areas of our life. But that's a hard discipline, because that's just you by yourself. You're like, I don't like being by myself. It's quiet. I need noise. I need... Oh, you need the Lord. We're going to see that in this situation. Verse 24, it says, but the boat by this time was a long way from land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. Well, Jesus has dismissed them. He's dismissed the crowds. He's gone up into the mountain to pray. The disciples are on their way to the other side, and oh, no. It wasn't smooth sailing. It wasn't a 3-hour tour. There was some wind. There was some waves. They were stuck in the middle of the lake. It's not a big lake. The Sea of Galilee. The sea part is a little misnomer. It's not very big. But storms rise up quickly. And they were about as in the middle as you could get. About 4 miles from shore. You can't see that land in that situation when it's dark, when the waves are crashing and the wind is howling. They were distressed. The word beaten, or in another translation tossed, is translated in Matthew 8 as tormented. It means they were tested by torture. What? They were being tortured and tormented for their lives? The wind was contrary. The wind was fierce. It's a bad night. They're trying to be obedient. Jesus said, get in the boat and go to the other side. It's like they're trying. It's not working. It's dark. It's gloomy. The storm is violent. The water is angry. The worst part of all, there's no Jesus. Remember earlier, they were in a storm, but Jesus was on the boat. He was sleeping. They had to wake him up. He's like, peace be still. They're like, whoa. But now, no Jesus. Ever feel that way? Feel that the storm is raging, that things are happening that you can't control, that there's no hope, that it's dark, that it's gloomy, everything's upside down, you feel like, where's Jesus? But think about this. Jesus sent them on the trip. Jesus said he would see them on the other side. And Jesus always keeps his word. He brought them into that trip. He brought them into that moment, into that storm. We could say then that they were in a storm in the exact center of the will of God. I don't like the sound of that. But that's what happened. It's not like they were Jonah and deliberately disobedient and running from God, and so God brought a storm to get them into the will of God through the fish, whale, pig. Did Jesus know the storm was coming? Oh yeah. But here's the thing. They were safer in the storm, in God's will, than if they were doing it their own way and gone it another way. When you're in God's plans, you're safe in the midst of the storm. Warren Wiersbe talks about two kinds of storms in the Bible. Storms of correction and storms of perfecting. Storms of correcting is what Jonah was in. He needed to be disciplined. And so God whipped up a storm there to direct everything and to change the direction of Jonah to get him to go the right direction. But the disciples, they're doing what Jesus said to do. It's not a storm of correction, but of perfecting. Perfecting? Yeah, God's always in the process of changing us to be more like him. It's sanctification, that ongoing work that happens until heaven. You're not going to stop growing unless you desire it, unless you stop growing and learning, but it's an ongoing work, and so storms of perfection come into our life. And it's good to know the difference. It's good to examine what's happening in your life. Is this something that God's trying to get me to repent of, and then the thing will be over, or do I just got to go through it, but know that he's in it? We'd rather there be no storm. We'd rather there be smooth sailing. In fact, I think we think sometimes that if we're following Christ, if we're in his will, we'll have smooth sailing. But remember John 16:33, in this world you will have tribulation, Jesus said. So if you're in a storm, or once coming, you're welcome. Remember that Jesus brought you into it. He will bring you through it to help you grow through it. Verse 25, in the fourth watch of the night he came to them walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." The fourth watch of the night? Well, between 3 and 6 a.m. So how long have they been out there? Up to 9 hours? In a little boat? Beaten by waves, wind, rain, dark. Ever felt like that? The tiredness, the despair, the hopelessness? See, they had forgotten. No one spoke up and said, "Hey, remember, Jesus said we'll see him on the other side." No one did that. And so they're all there rowing, they're trying, and it's frustrating. It seemed to last forever. There was no end in sight. And it was at that point, when all was darkest, Jesus approached. He came in an unusual way, for sure. And so, because he came walking on the water, they thought it was a ghost, because you don't see people walking on water every day. It's not a regular thing. There's not a course you take. How to walk on water. That's called drowning. They weren't looking for him. Which doesn't make sense because they were in the storm. They should have been crying out for him. But when he came to them, they're like, "Yeah, ghost. Why did he walk on the water?" We can get real stuck in this, but I think it's just to show them that the thing that they feared the most, the sea, was only a staircase for him to come. Often we fear difficult things of life only to discover that these are the things that bring us closer to Jesus. It's not like we put up a little recipe of things we want bad to happen in our life. Like, this would be great. I can't wait. I can't wait for surgery on that, and for someone to die, and I can't wait for this to happen. And no one would do that. If you do, we have counseling available. Why? But in those things that come in life, those are opportunities. Often you don't know until you look back. And you see, okay, yeah, God steered me through that. I wouldn't want to go through it again, right? But in all of that, God had a purpose and a plan. Think of Joseph. He was able to go, man, you guys intended something for evil, but God had a bigger plan for good. He could have been bitter. He could have been just destroyed with rage against his brothers. Vengeance is mine, saith Joseph. But no, he let it go. Why? Because his eyes were on something bigger. Jesus is coming to them, not in a panic. He's not running on the water. He's walking. He's coming at just the right time. We looked at it a few weeks ago, Exodus chapter 3. Therefore, then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their suffering. And I've come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and those Jebusites. He was aware. They had been there for 430 years, and it wasn't that God was unaware. He was very much aware. What about Genesis 22? Abraham standing there with a knife over his son Isaac at God's command, but the angel comes at just the right moment. What if the angel was late? God sends the message to the angel, hey, you better get down there and stop Abraham. I'm still on break. God's never late. He's aware of what's going on. Psalm 139 details in vivid fashion all of God's understanding of us and of what's going on. Nothing escapes him. Jesus is close, but we often don't recognize him because we're not looking for him. We're looking for things to happen in a certain way. They were thinking not that Jesus is going to come and he's going to make everything right because he's there, but that the storm would end. They were thinking, we're just going to get there. But what if they had thought, yeah, if only Jesus was here. Remember last time Jesus was with us? That was awesome. But he's not. Are you looking for Jesus to enter into your situation, into your life? Like, I have and I do, and he doesn't do what I want him to do. Want him to do? He's going to do what's best for you. Doesn't always line up with what we think he should do. Therein lies the problem. The problem is not with him coming to us, it's with us wanting to dictate how he comes to us. Paul got into difficult situations, so much so that he writes in 2 Corinthians 1, he was burdened excessively, they were, beyond our strength, so that we despaired even of life. Things can get bad. Isaiah 43:2 says, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. We're kind of saying that in some of those songs. He may not come at the time you think, in the way that you think, but he'll be there. He is there. He knows what you have need of before you even ask. He waited till the ship was as far as possible from land, when all hope was lost, when there was nothing more humanly speaking that they could do. The boat was filling with water, the waves were big, the wind was strong, and they were hopeless. It's a powerful thing, hope. Did you know the Bible, I heard this week, doesn't tell us to tell people about our faith so much as our hope. Now you might think that's a bit semantics, but it's the hope that we have in Christ that we're to share. Why? Because people are hopeless. And if we give them a reason to hope, yeah, it's connected to our faith for sure. And sometimes that might be a quicker way to evangelize versus the 4 spiritual laws. Maybe they're not ready to hear that, but they're ready to hear, you know what? I went through this thing just like you're going through now, but here's how it worked out in my life. Why? Well, because I know God is in control. And I hope that even if this would happen this way, He's going to come through. Even when it seems like it's dark, there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's hope. We have hope. That's when Jesus came. And they're afraid. They're terrified. It's a ghost. Ah! First Scooby-Doo movie. What happens? Jesus immediately speaks to him. Why? Because the Word gives life. What does He say? Take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid. Notice the order. The first is an exhortation before the second, the revelation. Be encouraged. Take heart. What's he saying? I think it's what Paul will later write, 1 Thessalonians 5. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God for you in Christ Jesus. What's God's will for my life? Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances. It's in the Greek even, it's all. It means everything. It's not in some circumstances, only in good circumstances. I think it's probably even more essential in those storms, in those places and times where we are hopeless, that we learn to rejoice, give thanks, and pray. That doesn't seem natural. No, that's why it's faith. And that's why it's supernatural. You've got to do something that doesn't seem that it's going to have any effect for it to have an effect. Right? Yeah, you step out in faith. God, I'm not enjoying this whole experience, but I'm giving thanks because somehow you've got a plan. Some way you're going to use all of this in my life for someone else's life. It's going to be good someday. I don't get it right now. But just a little bit of rejoicing, a little bit of giving thanks. What's that going to do? It's going to change your countenance. The first thing he said was, take heart. Be encouraged. Imagine, the wind's still going. The waves are still big. Hey, take heart. How about you do the calm the sea thing? That comes later. Why? You can do that anytime. But it's a faith-building time. And it's a recognizing who He is time. He's the one worthy of worship. Take heart. It is I. And Peter answered him. It's got to be Peter. Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. He said, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water. And he came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Those in the boat worshipped him, saying, Truly, you are the Son of God. Lord, if it's you, command me. I kind of think it's you, but you need to full-on command me to do this thing, because it's a little unnatural. I'm a fisherman. Peter, he was a fisherman. This is not something you see. It's not something you do. This is not a course. How to walk on water by Peter. Get in a bad situation and then step out of the boat. That's called drowning. That would not work well. This is not what the story is about. You're like, yeah, he started to sink, but before he sank, he walked on the water. That's pretty cool. There's no way about it. It's pretty cool. Kind of impossible, right? It's not naturally possible. But faith puts him in that place. They're like, yeah, but look what Jesus said about his faith. He said he had little faith. Oh, but Matthew 17 tells us if you have faith as small as a mustard seed. can see this mountain move from here to there. So little faith, that's okay. That's better than no faith. It's better to have little faith and have it start to grow in your life as you have opportunity to do so. When Jesus says to him, come, he doesn't go and like, okay, well, you got like a second boat or, he steps out of the boat. No one else did. There's no other disciples walking on water but Peter, however brief. It says he got to Jesus. How far away was Jesus? We don't know. Could have been a real quick trip. What happened to cause him to start to sin? Jesus had come. He comes to Jesus, and then he looks around. He took his eyes off Jesus. Whenever we take our eyes off Jesus, the situation seems insurmountable. Faith goes down the tube because we're consumed by what's happening presently rather than who's in charge heavenly. When you look around, you're divided. Doubt is to literally be divided in two. True faith is single-minded focus on Jesus. Single-minded focus on Jesus. Not just on, well, I'm focused on Sunday. But the rest of the week, that's my time. No, it's ongoing. Right? Faith is ongoing. When he took his eyes off Jesus, he was divided in two. He was standing at two ways. You only go one direction at a time. And when you doubt, you start to waver between what's right and what's true. And you're choosing something else. And I think this is what came to Peter's mind later when he would write, the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers. Why? Because he understood it. And even when my eyes are off him, his eyes are still on me. Even when I have little faith, he's still responding to just that little faith for me. He's open to my prayers. He didn't forget me. He didn't use me as a lesson to have me drown. And say, you only have little faith, so, well, next disciple. Can you imagine? Right? There'd be no more disciples. There'd be no church. Because Jesus would have left and said, okay, everyone's gone. Yeah, that's not going to work. He at once admonishes him to, why did you doubt? But it was in a correcting kind of way. Because he understood what was coming for Peter down the road. Some great highlight moments with some huge lows. Like, little girl, aren't you one of Jesus' disciples? No, I don't know the man. How could it do? 3 times he denies Jesus. That's a pretty low moment. And yet he also knows he's going to see him restored. And then he's going to preach a sermon and 3,000 will get saved. And on it goes. But he needs to continue to see his faith built. Not in a miracle worker. Otherwise, he would have hung out with the crowds, with the 5,000 being fed and said, all right, for breakfast tomorrow we're having, No. It was so that they would get to this point in place in verse 33. Oh, you have little faith. Why do you doubt? Why do we doubt? Why do we doubt? Well, because maybe we forget. We forget his words. They forgot his words. I'll see you on the other side. No one spoke up. Said, hey, it's okay. Keep working, but we'll do what we can to stay afloat, but somehow it's going to work out because Jesus said he'll see us on the other side. He didn't mean heaven. He meant the other side of the lake. Why do we doubt that God is at work in our lives? Well, we doubt because it's not working how we think it should work. God's not doing what we think he should be doing. And we've got all these things, and then sometimes there's steps of faith that we're not willing to take. And so God's waiting for you to take steps of faith. Because it's part of the growing process. It's a learning process. And if we understand who Jesus is, that he's the Son of God, he's worthy to be worshipped, well then, no matter what the storm, our eyes will stay fixed on him. He grabs hold of Peter, they jump in the boat. Immediately they're back in the boat. The wind stopped. Last time, what manner of man is this? They're like, whoa. This time, those in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. They've moved from impressed to worship. It's a big difference. The crowds were impressed by Jesus, but they didn't worship him. They kept looking for Jesus to do something for them, but they weren't ready to worship him. The disciples, for the first time, worshiped Jesus here. They understood very well what the Old Testament law said. That began with worship only one God. You shall have no other gods before you. They were all Jews. They understood we can't just worship multiple gods. There's only one. So they're ascribing to Jesus godhood. It's not an accident that they worship. It's going to happen throughout the Gospels. Those that believe and trust are going to worship Jesus. He's worthy. It's right. It's appropriate. And in our lives, worship is not just Sunday morning. And it's more than a song, as the song goes. It's every day, in every way. In every situation of our life, are we giving worth? Are we ascribing glory to God or to, and what could it be? Well, examine your life. What is getting the attention, the time, the energy, the finances? Is God reflected in all those things, or is, and you could put any number of things that we worship rather than the Lord. But he's worthy. Say, well, yeah, if I was in a storm and Jesus appeared and, then it was calm, I'd worship him too. I have. That would be, whew. Oh, but think about your life. But think about all the things that you've gone through, the storms, the times of difficulty, the situations that seemed impossible. But now you look back and go, he was there. He brought me through. And even if none of those things were true, I don't have any of those stories. No. He died on the cross for you. He's worthy of worship. If that's all he has ever done and will ever do for you, that's enough. And then we ascribe to him worship. We honor him. We respect and give our lives for him and to him. And that has to play out in our lives. It can't be just something we say and we put on a show and we kind of show up to sit and, I don't know why I'm here. I think it's just because of the kids, or I think it's here because of my husband or my wife. But it's got to get deeper within us so that we live it day in, day out. He's worthy of worship. Because if you're not worshiping Jesus, you're worshiping someone or something else. They worship Jesus. See, what we can say about all of this is that Jesus told Peter to come. Peter was like, if it's really you, tell me to come. He's like, come. Jesus says, come to me all you burdened, and I'll give you rest. In the book of Revelation, the Spirit says, come. To who? To Jesus. Whatever's going on, you will come to him. You will find your rest. You will find your purpose and his plan for your life. Why? Because he's going to be faithful to complete that which he has started in you. He's the author and finisher of our faith, Hebrews chapter 12 tells us. He finishes what he starts. Like, yeah, but, well, we fail, we stumble, we fall. But in the end, God will succeed in your life. They walked together on the water. Imagine you're one of the other disciples and you're sitting there like, Peter, don't do it. Oh, that's kind of cool. Ooh, yeah, I knew it. I called it. And then all of a sudden, Jesus saves them and they're in the boat and the water's, it's all calm. What does that do for the rest of them? Apparently a lot, because they worship Jesus as the Son of God. One person stepping out in faith impacts many. That happens in our lives all the time, and you're unaware of it. As you live for the Lord by faith, the ripples of your life are going out. I don't see it. It's happening, even when you don't see it. The disciples had seen Jesus feed 5,000, and God permits them to go through the storm. Later, in the book of Acts chapter 4, there's 5,000 people that have come to the Lord. What happens immediately after that? Storms of persecution. They're all driven out of Jerusalem, persecuted for their faith. It often happens that way. God works in your life, does something great. Like, oh, this is super, it is great. It was a great retreat. Look out. Storms are coming. Like, that's not fair. I just had a great time. Well, yeah, because anything the Lord does, the enemy wants to mimic. But his only way of mimicking it and copying it is to make it bad for you. Because he can't create good. He tries to tear down, destroy, and kill. God allows those times to be built up so that you're ready for what's coming. Peter had to have some form of courage. And you might think, well, yeah, he had a little, but big deal, he sank. Little faith, that's all that's required. Jesus isn't asking you to jump off a building and prove your faith. That would be presumption. Not a good plan. But he's just saying, have a little faith. Trust me just this much today. And as you exercise that faith, it's like working out. If you start with a little and then you work your way up, it's okay. You'll get stronger. But if you try to get into the gym and you, well, I tried. I'm going to go for a jog. Well, how are you going to go? I'm going to go 10 miles today. Have you ever jogged before? No, but I can do 10 miles. That's not going to go well for you. You'll get discouraged. Blisters. Dehydrated. Pass out. We'll visit you in the hospital. But what if you said, I'm going to go for a block or two? Yeah, you can do that. And then walk. Yeah, and then the next day, a couple more blocks. And you build up. It's the same thing with our faith. It starts with little. This miracle brings the disciples, and hopefully us, to that place where we look to the King. Not for what he's going to give for us, but for his rule and reign in our lives. Matthew is all about Jesus as King. And when Peter cries out for Jesus to command him, it's in the form of asking the King to tell me, to command me to come. He wanted to be under that authority. And when Jesus gave the word, he went for it. He didn't understand it. He didn't have the physics figured out. He didn't know how it would work, but he trusted Jesus. Do you? Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for continuing to speak to us and guide our lives. Thank you for even those periods of time, those storms, those situations in our life that